To start off this documentary, we must ask what the Reconstruction era is. The Reconstruction era started in April 9th, 1865 till March 31st, 1877. It began immediately after the Civil War, in which the previously seceded Southern states tried to unify with the Northern states and figure out how to integrate the now freed African Americans into society. This video will explain 5 individuals who influenced this Reconstruction era. First, we will talk about Andrew Johnson. Born on December 29th, 1808 in Raleigh, North Carolina, Andrew Johnson took over the presidency after the assassination of the previous president, Abraham Lincoln. Johnson was very well educated in the Constitution of the United States, which he was able to recite. During his presidency, Andrew Johnson vetoed the Civil Rights Act and the extension of the Freedmen's Bureau, which protected the rights and the citizenship of African Americans. Andrew Johnson's reasoning for the veto is that he did not want to aid a specific type of ethnic group. His veto united both moderate and radical Republicans together, as they were outraged because of the veto and the blatant racism. Radical Republicans were people who fiercely advocated for the abolition of slavery. We will mention later some people who were radical Republicans. Congress decides to override the Civil Rights Act veto, which they were successful at. This was the first instance of Congress overriding a veto by the president. Many people viewed Andrew Johnson as not fit for his position. He would later be impeached due to violating the Tenure of Office Act. The Tenure of Office Act prevents the president from removing certain office holders without the authorization of the Senate. Andrew tried to remove Edwin M. Stanton, who usually went against Johnson's ideas. Johnson was also the first president to be impeached. Next, we will talk about Charles Sumner. Sumner was born on January 6, 1811 in Boston, Massachusetts. Charles Sumner in the Reconstruction led the radical Republicans to achieve total equality for African Americans. Sumner was very determined to give equal rights to African Americans. He would help create the Freedmen's Bureau, which helped African Americans transition from slavery to freedom by providing food, shelter, clothing, etc. Sumner also helped draft both the 13th and 14th Amendment. The 13th Amendment is to abolish slavery, and the 14th Amendment grants citizenship to anyone born in the United States. President Andrew Johnson had very different views that offended Sumner. Andrew Johnson was lenient to the Southern states and vetoed against the Civil Rights Act. Sumner made the call to impeach Johnson and criticized Johnson, saying that he is the impersonation of the tyrannical slave owner. Hiram Revels, born on September 27, 1827 in Fayetteville, North Carolina, was the first African American to serve the U.S. Senate. He served from 1870 to 1871, representing Mississippi. During his term in office, he advocated for desegregation in schools and on the railroad. He also spoke out against racial segregation and fought against efforts to undermine the rights of African Americans. Hiram Revels also spoke out against an amendment to the Georgia Readmission Bill that prevented African Americans from holding state office. When his term ended a year later, he became president of Alcorn College. Alcorn College, now known as Alcorn University, gave a higher education for African Americans. Hiram Revels' accomplishments of being the first African American Senate opened new doors for the future generations to come. Thaddeus Stevens, born on April 4, 1792 in Danville, Vermont, was a radical Republican congressional leader. Thaddeus Stevens grew up with an early hatred towards the slave system, being near it when he was young. He moved to Pennsylvania to practice law, which helped him when he was elected into Congress. Thaddeus Stevens was known for his leadership, parliamentary skills, and sarcastic eloquence. Thaddeus Stevens strived for justice for African Americans. He argued that the seceded Southern states were to be treated as conquered provinces, to which restraints of the Constitution did not apply. Thaddeus Stevens also helped the preparation of the 14th Amendment and the impeachment of Andrew Johnson. Because of Andrew Johnson's sympathetic attitude towards the seceded states, he created the resolution for his impeachment. Thaddeus Stevens advocated for the southern plantations to be taken away from their owners and some of their land to be given to freedmen. Like previously mentioned, Thaddeus Stevens was a radical Republican, meaning he heavily wanted abolition of slavery, in which at times could be taken too far. His plan failed. Thaddeus Stevens asked that he would be buried with other African Americans because he illustrates his principle, equality of man before his creator. Oliver Otis Howard, born on November 8, 1830, in Leeds, Maine, was a Union officer who helped headed the Freedmen's Bureau and helped aid and rehabilitate former slaves in the Reconstruction. During his time in the Civil War, he fought many battles such as the Battle of Chancellorsville, Battle of Fair Oaks, and the Carolina Campaign, just to name a few. During the Reconstruction era, Andrew Johnson appointed Howard to be the Commissioner of Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Land. The agency helped feed millions of the poor, build hospitals, and provide medical aid and negotiated labor contracts for the previously owned slaves. The Bureau also created many educational institutions and schools for African Americans. Howard University is a university named after Oliver Otis Howard, located in Washington, D.C. That wraps up the 5 influential people of the Reconstruction era. Thank you for watching.